I do believe that Bitcoin is going to crest the six-figure mark. It's going to be over $100,000 at some point later this year. That's my belief.
What's your view on Bitcoin, just looking at the macro picture now, like maybe in the next year or so? It seems like we're in this holding period. We're kind of range bound, jumping around like 65, basically a little under 60, 65. We're just kind of chopping for months now, it seems like. So what's your view on Bitcoin in terms of the price? And then I would love to hear your just thoughts in general about the ecosystem, given your position at the Bitcoin Opportunity Fund, kind of what you're seeing is exciting, what's being built that excites you and things like that.
Well, like I said, the Bitcoin has had this has been a very positive development with the ETFs being approved, the spot Bitcoin ETFs being approved, and for institutional investors to begin to buy this thing without having all the operational issues that they had prior to this. Really important development. There was not a flood of capital I expected more capital to come in quicker. But the reality is that these institutions they're taking a long time to get their heads around this and to understand it and to get the regulations internally around it. So they're going through their period right now of that 90 to 100-day period. They're just tripping that mark where they're getting comfort with it. That quiet period is kind of over. They see that the custody is working, whether through Fidelity or through Coinbase, that BlackRock and the other issuers of these ETFs are maintaining strong correlation to the underlying. It's very little slippage there, and so those have been really positive developments. A lot of capital has come into the space in these ETFs. And so that's really important. Going forward, Bitcoin, we must recognize, like we said before early on the show, is that Bitcoin is still looked at and seen as a risk-on asset. It will continue like that until it doesn't, until there's enough capital in the space, and until there's really enough understanding in the space about it. And institutional investors really understanding what it is and why they should hold it in their portfolio in a separate allocation. That's paramount for this asset to grow beyond where it is now. It has to get out of that risk on asset mindset. It will eventually, in my opinion. It's going to continue. It's going to take more capital and continued growth and understanding across all of these different types of investors. And so what I believe is that over the course of this year and next, we're going to see a lot of institutional investors get their head around this and start establishing 1%, 2%, 3% positions in Bitcoin using these ETFs. And some of them will, especially family offices and smaller and hedge funds, and perhaps smaller institutions, will get their own ability to buy Bitcoin without having to use the ETFs, which will just expand on that. And that will mean that they're getting great comfort in it and understanding around it, and getting comfortable with the risk of actually owning it themselves. So, but I think that that's going to continue. And so we're going to see this kind of trickle right now of institutions. We're going to turn that's going to turn into a kind of a stream and a flow, and then a steady flow. And just like a steady flow of a river of money that's coming into the space as these institutions get their head around it. Because like I said, they're going to take a 0.5% to 1% position. They'll stare at it on their sheets every single day until they decide whether they want to sell it completely or make it a full position of 2%, 3%, 4%. And that's where kind of we're headed. And so if you think about it in those terms, just go back to first principles. That just means that more money is coming into the space, that Bitcoin's price should rise accordingly. And to whatever multiplier you want to put on it, we've all talked about multipliers, but whatever you want to put on it because of the liquidity that's there now, I do believe that Bitcoin is going to crest the six-figure mark. It's going to be over $100,000 at some point later this year. That's my belief. The only caveat to that is if we do run into a hard downturn economically here, which I believe is a distinct possibility. It's a distinct possibility that we have some sort of event here where you have a washout of some sort of financial or perhaps an insurance or something institution that wipes out, and takes down a number of institutions with it, or threatens to in an act of contagion. And in that case, I see us having a kind of a steep drop off and then a V recovery, because again, go back to the other first principle, is the treasury market must stay liquid, and they will print to make sure it does. So if it does dip down from here and we have a sharp drawdown, I believe that would be a buying opportunity, because I do believe that the Fed and the Treasury will come back to the rescue and print more money, and they'll print more than they ever have before in multiples of it, because they have to keep this thing liquid. So that's the only caveat. That's the only question. And how long that takes, when that happens, anybody's guess. I do believe there will be volatility in Bitcoin, but I believe that volatility will continue on the upside. And that's why I'm so excited about the opportunities ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it just reminded me of I feel like people forget about Credit Suisse, being a globally systemically important bank, basically being on the brink of collapse, and then there's like a shotgun acquisition on a Sunday. It's like they'll do anything to kind of keep the system alive, and because that was like a potential contagion event, right? If something like that of that size went down, I mean, the contagion would have been really, really big.
Would have been catastrophic, yeah.
Yeah, so they'll come in and save the day, I think. But you're right; it could be very volatile, and in a sell-off situation, I don't think Bitcoin will be like shooting to the moon while everything else is falling. I don't think that's realistic. But I do think they'll come in and try to save the system. And then the ETF, I think I agree completely, because you've seen like Fidelity, BlackRock, and I think the fellows over at Bitwise have all said the same thing, which is that the first wave of this buying was retail, primarily retail, which had me really bullish, because I'm like, the institutional wave that everyone talks about, it hasn't even really happened, according to these issuers themselves. And so I think you're right. I think it's just going to take time for them to see these things traded, do the due diligence on them, and then finally pull the trigger. And then, like you said, maybe increase to a real allocation later down the road. So I think we're just in the early innings of that. But the pipelines are there. They're there, ready to go. And if they want to make that decision, I think it's going to be really exciting for the next couple of years. As we know, like Bitcoin is a very unique value proposition. And I think they're going to get their heads around it. But what about like the Bitcoin Opportunity Fund? Just real quick, like what kind of like building are you seeing that's exciting you outside the price action of Bitcoin itself? I know you and David Foley kind of work together on that fund and are always looking for opportunities. So anything interesting that you're seeing on the ground floor?
Yeah, I mean, we're investing in a bunch of different things that are super interesting. People think about Bitcoin, think about mining. Of course, we've got Bitcoin mining, but we also own companies that are into like Anchor Watch, that are into and they're creating the ability to have insurance around your Bitcoin holdings, and a really sophisticated hierarchy system for multi-sig protection on your Bitcoin holdings and your keys. And so that's one of the things that we're excited about. We just made investment in this company Epic, and they're developing some great technology around chipsets and mining, and we're super excited about that. There's as we go and we see more and more financial companies that are looking to solve problems that arise from people holding Bitcoin and wanting to do things around it. Those are interesting things to us. And so we're seeing a ton of opportunity in the space. And I think that this opportunity is only going to grow as this ecosystem grows with the value of Bitcoin. So we remain extremely optimistic and excited about the space.